So you can see why this would be like an entire class. But the common wisdom is that our videos shouldn't be more than 5 minutes long. All of these have been more than 5 minutes, but not by much. So there's a chance you're actually watching all of them. So we're supposed to break them up like this. And I get it. So that's why I'm doing it. I'm doing a different video for each little thing. So here's the big fallacy. And sometimes the biographical fallacy is folded into it. It's the fallacy of intent. I-N-T-E-N-T, as in what you intend to do. It's sometimes called the intentional fallacy. I kind of like the fallacy of intent better myself, but either way. And that fallacy says, well, one way to phrase it is, you should not have to know what an author intended when they wrote a work of art or created the work of art in order to appreciate the work of art. It's not saying that Kurt Cobain didn't intend for that song to be his Beatles song. And it's not to say that that author in the example from the last video didn't intend for the curtains just to be blue and not to mean anything else. They may have, but you shouldn't have to know what they intended or not in order to be able to apprehend the meaning or the impact or the significance of the work of art. If for no other reason, then again, 99 times out of 100, you're not going to have access to their intent. But there's a different phrasing of the fallacy of intent that I think takes it even further. This I got from a professor in grad school, and I have bad memories of grad school, but I remember this because it seems to me so insightful, and that is this. Even if we could recover the intent of the creator at that moment of creation, even if we could fully recover what the author intended to do when the author wrote this sentence in this chapter of this novel, even if we could, we would not exhaust the limits for the possibility of interpretation. There are a couple of things there. One of them, authors change their minds about stuff all the time. I mean, you can look at an artist like, for some reason, Bowie is coming to mind, like David Bowie or Prince. And they will give you, and you ask them, so what were you thinking when you wrote Heroes? Actually, Heroes is a good example. Great song of Bowie's. His story about the creation of that song changed over time because part of it was a secret. Part of it involved his producer cheating on his wife, and Bowie couldn't reveal that information for a long time. So part of the intent behind the creation of the song had to be hidden. But then sometimes these artists change their stories completely. Maybe they realize something about themselves. Think about psychotherapy, right? If you're in therapy, one of the things that you try to do is better to understand your motives for doing things. Why did you get anxious when you found out you were going to have to go to classes on campus again in the fall, your therapist says. And you try to figure out why. You say to your therapist, I found out I may have to go to face-to-face classes in the fall, and I got just like a tightening in my chest, and I felt wired and twisted up and anxious. And they say, well, why did you? You say, I don't know. But then you talk about it and work through it together, and then, maybe in that session you come up with one possibility. But in between that session and the next session, you think about it further and you come up with another possibility. You expand on the first possibility. And then maybe 5 months later you think, oh my God, now I understand what was going on. And you go back and say, hey, remember when 5 months ago we were talking about I got anxious about having to go to campus? Now I had a revelation. I had an insight. Well, all of those could be true. All of them could have some measure of truth to it. But forget about the fact that we don't always know what we're doing or why we're doing it. Even if you could, maybe we say, well, the artist thinks about 20 years later isn't as important as what they were thinking when they were doing the writing. Fine. Even if you could recover that thought at that moment, it's still possible for us to interpret it in different ways. and interpret it in ways that have nothing to do with emotional impact, right? I can look at Silver Linings Playbook, and on the one hand, I can say, hey, I kind of get what's going on with Jennifer Lawrence's character there at the end, because she's lived her life after her husband died thinking she would never experience love again. And now this guy that she's been in love with says that he's in love with her, and she finds it hard to believe, but she decides that she's going to accept it. And maybe then, I mean, on the one hand, I can say, I understand that because it feels me down here. But then you can also say, so what's going on here with character development is, when she's listing off all the anti-anxiety medicines that you can take, she and Bradley Cooper were talking about the first time they meet. I think about this all the time. Every time someone tells me that they're taking Klonopin, and he mentions it, and she goes, Klonopin, just the way she says it. I think about it. You know, you could say, I know I can't take these because I have allergic reactions to them, so I can't take that kind of anti-anxiety medication. And so I look at that moment as a deeply personal experience for me. But it shouldn't have to. And it shouldn't have to that the author wanted it to. And that happens sometimes. So I'm going to give you an example, and then this will be the last video of this sequence.